Good morning. It's Friday, June 21st. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 259 days old. I'm Jonathan Schanzer, Senior Vice President for Research at Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Welcome back yet again to the FDD Morning Brief. You're going to hear a little less from me this morning because I pre-recorded a conversation with author, activist, and actress Noa Tishby. Our conversation went a little longer than expected, but I didn't want to cut any of it. Neither did our producer, Michael Abney. So catch that interview here momentarily on the FDD Morning Brief. Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah issued a revealing threat on Wednesday. After vowing to target all of Israel with his arsenal of Iranian weapons, Nasrallah directly threatened Cyprus. First, let's note that Cyprus is a member of the European Union. So yes, Nasrallah just threatened Europe. But Cyprus is a tiny country with an even tinier military. It poses no danger to Hezbollah. Admittedly, Israel has conducted training exercises in Cyprus, and there are listening towers that probably gather intelligence on Hezbollah. Maybe that's the bee in Nasrallah's bonnet. There are also those British air bases in Cyprus. On the night of April 13th, British fighter jets scrambled and actually downed some of those Iranian missiles. Those same jets would almost certainly scramble if Nasrallah tried to target Cyprus. But here's what I can't get over. Cyprus actually took in thousands of Lebanese refugees from previous wars. Cyprus is right now preparing to accept Lebanese refugees, not because they have to. The government has volunteered to do this for humanitarian reasons. So now Nasrallah is threatening the very country offering safe haven to the people who will flee the war that Nasrallah is about to start. He could clearly care less about the Lebanese people. Maybe this is obvious. Hezbollah has destroyed the country politically. It has bankrupted the country economically, and now its reckless aggression has Lebanon on the brink of war with Israel. By the way, anyone else notice how other countries from around the world keep getting pulled into this war? Asking for a friend. Now for your headlines. Headline 1, Canada designated Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. It took long enough. Canada's House of Commons first passed a motion to designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization in 2018. That was 2 years before the IRGC shot down a passenger plane, killing 85 Canadians on board. Ever since, the victims' families have pressed Ottawa to pull the trigger. U.S. lawmakers, Democrats, and Republicans have written Prime Minister Justin Trudeau urging him to take action. Trudeau refused until now. Why? I'm not quite sure, but better late than never, I suppose. Headline 2, a new United Nations report accuses the Iranian regime of committing crimes against humanity in the 1980s. 4 decades later, that makes Justin Trudeau look like Johnny on the spot. The UN report notes that the regime's 4-person death committee, which executed thousands of political prisoners in the 1980s, committed a wide range of heinous crimes. This isn't ancient history, folks. Past is prologue. The Iranian people continue to suffer under the repressive, human rights abusing clerical regime. And while the UN has done the right thing here, I continue to see it as an abject failure with a total inability to uphold even the most basic moral values amidst this war in the Middle East. And headline 3, Yale University failed to disclose millions in Qatari funding to the Department of Education. Yale is a new haven for Qatari funds. Get it? Okay, I know, dad joke, but wow. Yale reported a single $285,000 grant from the Qataris in 2015. Turns out Yale actually received more than $15 million from the Qataris since 2012. That's some creative accounting. Yale could be in deep doo-doo here. The Department of Education requires schools that receive federal funding to report foreign contributions exceeding $250,000. Yale didn't follow the rules. How many other schools have done the same? Just wait, more are coming. Okay, it's now time for my interview with Noa Tishby, the Israeli-born best-selling author who has emerged as one of the most tireless and tenacious voices in the fight against anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism since this war began. We caught up yesterday afternoon as schedules and time zones would allow. Here she is now on the FDD Morning Brief. Welcome to the FDD Morning Brief, Noa Tishby.
Hi. Great to be with you, Jonathan, as always.
Great to have you. Well, let me start with a I think just a basic question. This has obviously been a big part of your life for the last couple of weeks. Tell us about your new book with Emmanuel Acho of the Philadelphia Eagles, I might add. How's that going? What's the book about? And what's your life been like since the book's come out?
Well, it's all of our lives since October 7th have been upside down and inside out in so many ways. But I feel very blessed and very lucky that we were able to put this book out at the time that we did. It's called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew, and it's with Emmanuel Acho, who's an incredible NFL star and a social justice warrior that was basically sitting and asking me everything and anything that you want to know about the Jewish community. We started working on this book before October 7th. And then when October 7th happened, obviously it became a whole lot more urgent. And he is an incredibly gracious and curious partner. So, him coming from his life and me coming from mine makes for an interesting conversation. And people are responding very well to it. They're liking it.
Excellent. Well, glad to hear it. And always love it when a former Eagle goes on to do great things. Look, you're based in LA, in Hollywood, in Hollyweird. And definitely things have been weird for the last 8 months, right? This has been a major battleground in this war, right? You've got different celebrities coming out and taking different positions, sometimes outrageous ones. What's it like being there right now? What's it like being on the front lines of that particular battle during this war?
It's an interesting question because I feel like you and I, Jonathan, by the way, just a side note, if people don't know, you and I have known each other for many years, have worked together for many years. We testified in front of Congress. I quoted you up and down in my first book in regards to campus antisemitism and terrorism financing. And I feel that both you and I, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners now, we knew what was coming. We've tried to tell people, people are asking me, are you surprised? Were you surprised by October 7th or October 8th? And I'm like, no, not really. So sadly, what we feared came to pass. And a huge battleground was always campuses and was always Hollywood. So none of this is new to me, to you, to I'm sure a lot of people that were paying attention. Perception is reality. Israel and the Jewish people have completely neglected everything that has to do with diplomacy inside rooms or outside rooms, in media, on social media. I do not like the word hasbara because in Hebrew, lasbir means to explain. And if you need to explain yourself, you already lost the battle. So I've been advocating for many years to be proactive, to retell the story of Israel and retell the story of the Jewish people and get our seat at the table. So this is not new. None of this is new. So in that context, I have seen people shy away from Israel in Hollywood for decades. This is not new at all. I used to have conversations with people who would tell me, oh yeah, I love Israel. It's so terrible what is happening to Israel in the media. I'm talking about pre-October 7th. And I'd be like, great. Would you tweet about it? Would you be public about it? Would you come to an event? They're like, no, prefer not to. So Israel was always a controversial topic when it comes to Hollywood. Always. The difference that I am seeing right now, and it's actually a positive thing. I'm sure the majority of people that are not paying attention or don't know the intricacies of how Hollywood works look at it from the outside and it seems very negative. It actually is not. There are a lot of people within the Jewish community in Hollywood, whether actors or producers or executives, that are feeling and understand what is happening. I have seen a level of loud and proud kind of Jewish pride and being willing to put yourself out there and having people saying to me flat out, that's it. I've turned into a one issue voter. That's it. I am never going to be accepted. I am othered all the time. I'm going to take my seat at the table. I'm going to be vocal. So we look at this right now and we see a lot of the negative, but I would like us to notice a lot of the positive. We take for granted now that people like Deborah Messing, Michael Rappaport, and Eli Roth, and Gal Gadot, and we take it for granted that they're out and they're vocal. They have not been vocal up until, and Amy Schumer and Chelsea Handler and all these, and Jerry Seinfeld, all these people that have been getting, that were just very hidden, that most people didn't know where they stand and all that. We got Jerry Seinfeld kicking people out of a show aggressively because they are speaking up against Jews and Israel. So I don't think it's as dire as we think it is. What is happening and what is just infuriating is all the ceasefire, no hostages talk. that is just a part of the international virtue signaling for absolutely no, with no substance. We're seeing this when climate terrorists are throwing paint at art as if that's going to make a difference. It's the same as wearing a ceasefire pin with bloody hand, not knowing what it is that you're supporting, accidentally or not, helping jihadism take over America. So I think all in all, it's a little bit more complex. It's not as bad as it seems from the outside.
I think that's right. And I am heartened by what I see from a handful, or maybe even more than a handful.
Yeah, again, we have a lot of background, the two of us. I brought Jonathan to meet a bunch of my colleagues and friends from the Hollywood community. There's a whole lot more awareness and willingness to act, both publicly and behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciated that opportunity. Let me ask you.
I've tried to create a cabal for years. It doesn't exist, and I'm like, we should really have one. If they say that we have one, we may as well actually have one. I'm trying. It's not working out right now, but I'm trying. I'll keep you posted.
All right. I'm there for you. All right. Let me ask you just about what's going on in Israel right now. You have friends and family there.
Yeah.
How do you think that, in general, the Israeli public is holding up? This has been a stressful 8 months, obviously. So from a social perspective, how are things going? From a political perspective, how are things going? You've got a little bit of distance and perhaps some perspective that they don't have.
I do. I think the word to describe it would be balagan. There is, it's messy. Democracy is messy. A democracy that is dealing with jihadi Nazism, fundamentalism, psychosis on all its borders is even more messy. I can say that the Israeli people are wounded but resolute. So everybody is shell-shocked to some extent or another. Everybody is looking around going, how do we get to this place? But they're also resolute in seeing how people are jumping into volunteering and defending and fighting is beyond. I just wrote an op-ed in Sapir magazine called The Courage to be Uncool. And I talked about this concept of post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth, I heard about that for the first time in Hebrew. Tzmicha post-traumatit. And I heard about it from my sister and my niece. Both of them studied psychology. And immediately, I'm getting goosebumps. Immediately, as soon as I heard that, I intuitively knew what this was. I was like, oh my God, that's what we do. That's what Jews do. That's what Israelis do. So the recovery from what's happening right now within Israel is going to be long and it's going to be painful. It's a decade of at least a decade of recovery, both financially, emotionally, wounded soldiers, PTSD soldiers and children. Reimagining the entire Middle East is going to be a challenging act. But I would never bet against the Jewish people, ever. We have histories. If you're a student of history even a little bit, don't bet against the Jews. So I'm when people are asking me if I'm optimistic or pessimistic, I say short term, I'm very pessimistic. Like it's going to get worse before it gets worse. Like we're not heading to, between the South and the North, and we'll get to that in a second. And Iran, it's not going to get better anytime soon, but long term will be okay.
Tend to agree and never underestimate the tenacity, the stubbornness of the Jewish people.
Pesky little creatures.
That's right.
Nobody can stop us.
That's right. Well,
in terms of Iran, I want to touch on that a little bit because I know you talk about that obviously a lot. It's quite shocking to me that Americans, specifically on the left side of the political map, but I would say a lot of Americans don't believe it when they hear it. Don't believe it when they hear it. There is no magic as to what Iran and the Revolutionary Guard and what these people want or are intending to do. There's no mystery there. They're telling us what they want to do. Death to Israel, death to America, caliphate, the Shiite crest. Like they're saying what they want to do. And for Westerners to not understand this, for Westerners to think that the price of being socially accepting is better than standing up against jihadism, it's insane. And I just hope that people would start understanding what it is that Israel's dealing with, because listen, we're not alarmists when we say it's coming everywhere. Coming to a theater near you, as we say here in Hollywood, it's what they say, it's what they want, it's what they intend. And if we don't stop them, it's what they'll do.
Well, let me ask you about that actually, because right now we're watching a lot of tension between the White House and the Netanyahu government, and some of it actually, I think, has to do with how they frame the war. Right, the White House, I think, has tried to make this really about Gaza. The Israelis are saying, well, it's more than that.
Sure.
And really, in my view anyway, it's about improperly framing all of this as a war waged by Iran and all of its proxies against Israel. And our inability to come to perhaps a mutually agreed upon description of this war could actually be a major source of tension. Would you agree with that?
I would agree to that. And also, we're missing the part of carry the big stick. So we're only doing the soft talking for a very long time. We're talking to these people and the Iranians, and we're trying and we're negotiating. There is no threat of a real big stick, and they know it. And that is something that in the language of the Middle East, this doesn't fly. You have to have a credible threat on the table. Listen, I'm a dove. I don't want any of this. I don't want war. I wish we can all kumbaya together. But when you talk about jihadism, when you talk about Sam Harris calls it. Sam Harris actually said that those people, they're the Hamas and all of those, the people that support that ideology, they're worse than the Nazis because they're like the Nazis with an expectation of heaven. So we're talking about people that are running into death gladly, that are just like, yes, kill me, kill all our children. Absolutely. As many more Palestinians dying. That's so great. And the West does not understand that this is what we need to be dealing with. So the framing of this that I've been saying for a very long time, the framing of this is not Israel versus Hamas. It's West versus East. It's jihadism, psychosis versus Western liberal values that we all need to uphold. And there's a lot of things brewing in Europe right now. It's arguably Europe has already gone to that ideology, has already lost. We'll see how quickly we can wise up to it here and stop being afraid by people calling us Islamophobic when we talk about jihadism. Like I stopped using the word, and I've been saying this for a while now. I stopped using the word terrorists. Terrorists have lost its meaning because of the whole TikTok, the whole one man's terrorist is another man's like freedom fighter. So I'm like, okay, great. Terrorism in and of itself is not an agenda. It's not an objective. Terrorism is the means to the end. Terrorism is, you use terrorism in order to get to what? And the what is what we need to talk about. And the what is jihadism, and the what is the caliphate, and the what is Sharia law, and the what is Islam taking over the world, the radicalism of the radical. That is the what, that they use terrorism in order to get to that. And we have to start talking about that. And we have to start talking about that using our Muslim friends that also understand that there's an issue there. Using the Iranian women that have been trying to call us for years and tell us that they're dying, they're oppressed, they can't deal with this. So we need to start listening to the moderate world, the moderate voices within the Muslim world, and actually take heed and listen to what they say, and stop judging anybody who's criticizing that particular agenda, because it's coming for all of us.
You and I both testified at the Ways and Means Committee back in November about the bad actors on campus. How do you think that front is going some 7 months later? Let loose here. I want to hear your take.
It's a major area of focus for both of us. I feel like, again, we were the children, the boy in the dam holding with a finger going, are you seeing what we're seeing? I remember the first time when I read your testimony, your initial testimony. From what year was that at the White House?
That was 2016.
I read it like then, around that time. And I read your testimony about the connection between AMP, SGP, BDS, that entire movement, and people that were tied to terrorism financing. And I was floored. Jonathan, I was like, how do people not know about this? This is amazing. And I was floored that people did not listen to what it is that we both had to say at the time. Things are different now. Every normal American, it doesn't matter if you're left, right, center, whatever, you're looking at what's happening on campus. And again, intuitively, people understand that this is not peaceful. This is not progressive. They see that they see the coordination, they sense in their gut kiss, right? And the kishke, that there's something wrong about this. When protesters take down the American flag and put up a Palestinian flag and are calling for intifada and yelling Allahu Akbar on campuses, most Americans don't like that, as they shouldn't. So is it going as fast as we want? No. Is AMP being investigated by the IRS and the FBI? Not yet. it's not happening in the speed that we want it to happen. I want SJP, BDS, the entire movements to be banned off of campuses. It's not a movement. It's not a progressive movement. It's not about freedom of speech. They're calling for violence. They're calling for violence. They want to take down the Middle East single consistent democracy. That's what, by all means necessary. They say it. So this is incitement for violence 101. These groups, these organizations should not be allowed on campus. And that's it, period, end of story. It's not happening fast enough, but I do think the majority of Americans are uncomfortable, to say the least, about everything that's happening on college campuses in America right now.
And I think in no small part due to you.
Due to you. Can't do it alone.
Well, we'll leave it there. I want to thank you very much, Noa Tishby, for joining us today on the FDD Morning Brief.
Thank you for having me.
All right, here's what FDD has on tap for you today. FDD's founder and president, Cliff May, reflected on his recent trip to Israel in his weekly column for the Washington Times. Cliff calls out the insanity of those who demand that Israel seek peace agreements with Iran's murderous proxies. He notes how international demands for ceasefire deals instead of ending the war with Hamas or preventing a war with Hezbollah will only perpetuate conflict and lead to more innocent lives lost in the future. It's a worthwhile read. And you've heard this refrain before, keep your eyes on the North. That was the thrust of a new piece I just published with my colleague David Daoud in the Dispatch. We explain why this is a war that should be avoided at all costs, but we also look at the failed policies that have put Israel and Lebanon on their collision course. We even suggest a few ways the Biden administration might help avert this disaster. In short, it's time to turn up the pressure way up on the Iranian regime and its proxies. Long overdue. And finally, check out the latest episode of Generation Jihad podcast. Bill Roggio sat down with Iraq and Afghanistan combat veteran Will Selber to explore the latest developments in the global war on terror and how jihadi leaders are capitalizing on Hamas's October 7 attack. They discuss the fallout of America's botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, including the recent visit of the head of the Haqqani network to the UAE and Saudi Arabia. That was not a good development. All right, that's another episode down and another week in the books. Read our expert analysis on our website, fdd.org. Read our quick takes on X at FDD and support our work with a tax-deductible donation, as always, at fdd.org/invest. Tune in Monday for more cutting-edge news and analysis, plus a conversation with Haneen Ghadar, author of the Washington Institute monograph, Hezbollah Land, a timely discussion, to say the least. Until then, have a great weekend. I'm Jonathan Schanzer, signing off for FDD.